Hello, how are you today? I'm Mary, Birmingham, specialist, working for HHC, U.S. 1st Military Intelligence Brigade located in Pyeongtaek. So glad to see you again. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to talk about reducing employee expense.
Reduce employee expenses. Minimize workforce expenditures. Lower payroll costs. Cut staffing costs. Decrease labor overhead. Trim personnel expenses. Slash employment costs. Pare down worker compensation. Reduce salary outlays. Cut human resource costs. Streamline labor spending. Decrease wage expenses. Lower labor-related costs. Minimize payroll expenditure. Trim down labor budget. Reduce employee-related costs. Lower personnel expenditures. Decrease staffing expenses. Cut down on payroll budget. Minimize costs associated with employees. Reduce employee expenses. We need to tighten our belts to reduce employee expenses. Minimize workforce expenditures. To stay afloat, we must minimize workforce expenditures. Lower payroll costs. It's time to cut corners and lower payroll costs. Cut staffing costs. To make ends meet, we have to cut staffing costs. Decrease labor overhead. By decreasing labor overhead, we can keep our heads above water. Trim personnel expenses. We should trim personnel expenses to keep the wolf from the door. Slash employment costs. Slashing employment costs will help us weather the storm. Pare down worker compensation. Let's pare down worker compensation to avoid going over budget. Reduce salary outlays. Reducing salary outlays is necessary to keep the business in the black. Cut human resource costs. To keep our operations lean and mean, we must cut human resource costs. Streamline labor spending. Streamlining labor spending is essential to stay in the game. Decrease wage expenses. We need to decrease wage expenses to keep our heads above water. Lower labor-related costs. Lowering labor-related costs will help us save for a rainy day. Minimize payroll expenditure. To avoid a financial pinch, we must minimize payroll expenditure. Gubyo jichulil chozo wahaseyo. Jajon jagyo liomil pihagi wihai gubyo jichulil chozo wahaya habnida. Trim down labor budget. Trimming down the labor budget will keep us in the black. Anjanbi yesenil juliseo. Anjanbi yesenil julimyan ulinian hujileul ujihal su ishabnida. Reduce employee-related costs. Reducing employee-related costs is crucial to keeping the lights on. Jigwan guanlian bayanyil juliseo. Jigwan guanlian bayanyil julinian geosun hoselil uji hanun de junyo habnida. Lower personnel expenditures. We need to lower personnel expenditures to cut the fat. Inwin jichulil nachuseo. Bayang julgamil wihai inwin jichulil nachwoya habnida. Decrease staffing expenses. Decreasing staffing expenses will help us make ends meet. Inliog bayanyil juliseo. Inliog bayanyil julimyan sujileul mikul su ishabnida. Cut down on payroll budget. Cutting down on the payroll budget is necessary to tighten our belts. Gubyo yesenil juliseo. Hialitilil jalamayagi wihai gubyo yesenil julinian goc pilio habnida. Minimize costs associated with employees. Minimizing costs associated with employees will help us stay afloat. Jigwan guanlian bayanyil chozo wahaseyo. Jigwan guanlian bayanyil chozo wahamyan sangjanhal su ishabnida. Reduce employee expenses. We need to save money by reducing employee expenses. Jigwan bayanyil juliseo. Jigwan bayanyil jalayaseo daniel akioya hayo. Minimize workforce expenditures. To survive, we must minimize workforce expenditures. Inliog jichulil chozo wahaseyo. Salanamgi wihai inliog jichulil chozo wahaya hayo. Lower payroll costs. It's time to find ways to lower payroll costs. Gubyo bayanyil nachuseo. IJ gubyo bayanyil nachul bangbiobil chajaya hayo. Cut staffing costs. To balance our budget, we have to cut staffing costs. Jigwan bayanyil juliseo. Yesenil maikugi wihai jigwan bayanyil jalaoya hayo. Decrease labor overhead. By decreasing labor overhead, we can stay in business. Injinbil juliseo. Injinbil julimian ulinian seobil gaisoil su isioyo. Trim personnel expenses. We should trim personnel expenses to avoid financial trouble. Inwin bayongyil juliseo. Jajonjog munjaleul pihagi wihai inwin bayongyil jalayo yahayo. Employment costs. Slashing employment costs will help us survive tough times. Goying bayongyil dapog juliseo. Goying bayongyil dapog julimian eolion sigilil gubogil su isioyo. Pare down worker compensation. Let's pare down worker compensation to stay within budget. Jigwan basingul juliseo. Yesanil gkg yhai jigwan basingul julibsida. Reduce salary outlays. Reducing salary outlays is necessary to stay profitable. Gubio gichulil juliseo. Igul uji hagi yhai gubio gichulil julinian goc piliohayo. Cut human resource costs. To keep our business running, we must cut human resource costs. Injog jwan bayongyil juliseo. Seobil gaisa hagi yhai injog jwan bayongyil jalayo yahayo. Streamline labor spending. Streamlining labor spending is essential to compete. Anjanbi gichulil ganso wahaseyo. Jongjaon hagi yhai anjanbi gichulil ganso wahanian goc junyohayo. Decrease wage expenses. We need to decrease wage expenses to stay in business. Imagium bayongyil juliseo. Seobil gaisa hagi yhai imagium bayongyil jalayo yahayo. Lower labor-related costs. Lowering labor-related costs will help us save money. Nodong guanlian bayongyil nachuseo. Nodong guanlian bayongyil najumian donyil jaliagal su isioyo. Minimize payroll expenditure. To avoid financial problems, we must minimize payroll expenditure. Gubio gichulil choso wahaseyo. Jajonjog munjaleul pihagi yhai gubio gichulil choso wahayahayo. Trim down labor budget. Trimming down the labor budget will keep us profitable. Anjanbi yesanil juliseo. Anjanbi yesanil julimian ulinian igul ujihal su isioyo. Reduce employee-related costs. Reducing employee-related costs is crucial to staying in business. Jigwan guanlian bayongyil juliseo. Seobil gaisa hagi yhai jigwan guanlian bayongyil julinian goc junyohayo. Lower personnel expenditures. We need to lower personnel expenditures to save money. Inwin gichulil nachuseo. Danyil jaliagagi yhai inwin gichulil nachwoyahayo. Decrease staffing expenses. Decreasing staffing expenses will help us balance the budget. Cut down on payroll budget. Cutting down on the payroll budget is necessary to save money. Minimize costs associated with employees. Minimizing costs associated with employees will help us stay in business. Reduce employee expenses. We need to save money by cutting employee costs. Minimize workforce expenditures. To survive, we must cut down on worker costs. Lower payroll costs. We need to lower the amount we spend on salaries. Cut staffing costs. We have to spend less on staff to balance our budget. Decrease labor overhead. Spending less on wages will help us stay in business. Trim personnel expenses. We should spend less on employees to avoid money problems. Slash employment costs. Cutting job costs a lot will help us survive tough times. Pare down worker compensation. Let's pay workers less to stay within budget. Yesanil gkg yhai jigwan basulil julibsida. Reduce salary outlays. Paying less in salaries is necessary to stay profitable. Cut human resource costs. We must spend less on employees to keep our business running. Streamline labor spending. We need to make labor spending simpler and cheaper. Decrease wage expenses. We need to spend less on wages to stay in business. Lower labor-related costs. Spending less on labor will help us save money. Minimize payroll expenditure. We need to pay employees less to avoid money problems. Trim down labor budget. Spending less on labor will help us make money. Reduce employee-related costs. Spending less on employees will help us keep the business open. Lower personnel expenditures. We need to spend less on staff to save money. Decrease staffing expenses. We need to pay less for staff to balance our budget. Cut down on payroll budget. We must spend less on salaries to save money. Minimize costs associated with employees. Spending less on employee costs will help us stay in business. Practice makes perfect. You got it? Repeat 30 times. Subscribe now.